All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to our 6-week webinar, The Ideal Qualitative Study with a Quantitative Component. William Bannon of StatsWhisper here again. And this week, we are at week 6, in which we will broach the process of the write-up and report of the study and the study results. So the first thing to acknowledge when writing up the study is that there are different professional formats. There's APA, American Psychological Association, which we are going to use here, AMA, American Medical Association, and MLA, right? So in this paper, we're going to use APA. We're going to go through the body of our paper using our sample study as an example. We're going to focus on data analysis, of course, but the manuscript will consider each little part of the paper. So the body of the paper, again, our magic number 7. We'll consider 7 little pieces. First, the title, next the abstract. Third, the introduction. Then the literature review and methods. And then 6, the results. And then 7, the discussion and conclusion. Now, the title is the first thing. The title, normally if you do a qualitative or quantitative paper, the title would suggest which type of study it is. But with mixed methods, you can't do that because it has both quantitative and qualitative. So one of the best ways to identify that is just come right out and put in the title, a mixed method study of. Right? So of course you don't have to, and it may fit better in some studies than others, right? But like our title might be, a mixed method study of factors that encourage meditation class attendance among a sample of retirement community residents, right? So just straightforward, and it's saying distinctively that it's mixed methods, right? Now, of course, if you didn't want to have a title where it says mixed methods, you might have one that reflects like a stronger quantitative or qualitative design, but you know, that's particular to every study. Now the abstract. So you see the fonts there. What's cool about an abstract? Well, I'm going to tell you. So an abstract is typically short, right? 150 to 250 words. You know, for all these guidelines, different journals have different requisites of how long an abstract and the rest of the paper and other rules, you know, apply, right? So it might be a longer abstract, and probably not shorter than 150 words, but you never know. So it's giving us a summary of the research questions, methods, designs, results, analysis, conclusions, right? So what's cool about it is it's a great way to focus your message and your study. And I'll elaborate a little. So Stephen Covey, in the famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, recommends to start with the end in mind. It's very good advice for a manuscript. So the abstract is a way of sort of writing out the whole manuscript in one paragraph, then fleshing it out into, you know, 24 pages. So in a way, the manuscript allows you to specify the beginning, middle, and end, right, of the entire paper before you even start. So you'll notice when you write a paper, many times your mind takes it in different directions, right? You kind of get lost in the writing. You might forget what the objective is, what the methods really were, right? So the abstract is almost like a map that keeps you on target throughout the whole paper writing process. So normally in an abstract, like I said, different journals have different, you know, requisites, but many of them ask you to list the objective, right? So what's the objective? So very plainly we say, and our objective is to identify factors related to meditation class attendance among our convenient sample. You see how we slipped that in there? So we put the sample type, right? So one sentence conveys many essential traits of the study, right? A convenient sample of 100 residents in a retirement community. So there's our target population in a major northeastern city. And there's our setting. Right? So one sentence, a whole bunch of key things. So then there's the methods. And like I said, this is short. So we specified our mixed method design here. We said this study employs an explanatory sequential design. Then we sort of define that, as a lot of people may not understand that right off the bat, where phase 1 involved gathering data, quantitative data, on factors related to meditation class attendance. Phase 2 was a follow-up qualitative, stage meant to explain the quantitative findings. Right? Then we're already at results. So you see how it gives you the essentials of all the paper right away. Right? And that's helpful not only to the reader, but the writer, the author. Right? So the results. So the results, we're just mentioning perhaps the statistical tool we use to produce the final results. Okay? So here, a multiple linear regression model indicated the primary factor influencing weekly meditation class attendance was the preference of the class instructor. Right? Very simple. And then the discussion or conclusion is, like the very, very essential message. Right? And we don't want it to be overblown or outside the boundaries of our findings. Right? So it's rather conservative. So we say the insight gained from these data suggest that selecting an instructor with specific qualities might be an effective method to increase meditation class attendance. Right? All right, now, going into the actual paper. Right? The first thing you might like to have is a real strong introduction. It's got to be focused. It's got to be compelling. It's got to convey why the topic's important, why it needs to be researched. Right? It has to say what issues or problems are addressed. Right? And in order to do that, you may include prior theory, theoretical, and empirical research, current knowledge, and then feel free to present citations. Right? So you're noting, you're making the argument, but then you're also citing studies that support your statements. Right? So they're not just statements, they're statements pointing out the current state of the literature. For example, right, so we learn through doing, not talking. So we'll apply it to our study. So we could say, research links several benefits with regular meditation, right? Including low blood pressure, citation, decreased stress, citation, other health outcomes, citations. Right? So it's not us just saying it, the research says it, right? And then we link it to our study population. The benefits are particularly important to those over age 65 who are at increased risk of negative health outcomes related to these conditions with the citation. So it's got to be short, a short number of sentences that really deliver on our take-home points. And you'll see the italicized words. These are the linking words, very important in a paper, but especially in the introduction, because it's making our argument. So these linking words are powerful. So, however, this is however referring to, the important outcomes. However, there's a dearth of research that identifies factors linked with meditation class attendance among this age group. Therefore, right, so you see the words link. Therefore, the current study examines factors associated with increased levels of attendance to meditation class among residents of a retirement community. So you can see our study, right? Our study was practical, but when we look at it in the context of the literature, it's really important. And then you may or may not say in the introduction, a mixed methods design was used, to gather quantitative and qualitative data toward identifying these factors. So the literature review. Now, again, focused and finite, because you'll notice when you read many, many papers, each one of them has its own direction, and as you read them and try to apply it to your literature review, it could send your literature review into many, many directions, which we don't want, right? We want a set direction before we start, right? So before we start, we know what we want to look at, and we fit everything into that context rather than being led by the other writings, okay? So let's say we have a 4-point plan, and this is general, but it's a good general plan. So first, we discuss the dependent variable, right? We might link the covariate variables to it. Second, we discuss the independent variable, right? And then third, this is when we put them together. So 1 and 2, they're separate. Third, we discuss the link between the dependent variable and the independent variable. Then in the last paragraph, we kind of highlight our study map information. Okay? So that's usually the last paragraph of the literature review. So one thing to keep in mind is if we were doing a qualitative study, the literature cited would primarily be qualitative. And if we were doing a quantitative study, the literature cited would primarily be quantitative. However, since we're doing a mixed method study, we'll probably have both quantitative and qualitative citations. And so we need to be aware of, with this combination of methods, how that's going to change a typical paper written via just one method. So there may be a focus, right, on the qualitative or quantitative literature, right? And the citations for the quantitative and literature might be mixed and in the same section, or there might be separate sections of the literature review that presents quantitative and qualitative, right? So it's all very specific to the actual study. And many times you might not know before you start. You might start writing it out, and then you see what fits best, right? So it's in the doing that will tell you what's best, right? So as we said, the combination will vary according to the needs of the mixed method study. So we have science, we have art. So a lot of this is very art-like. You're feeling it out and you're seeing what hooks up best. All right, now, the literature review for our sample study. So first we discuss the dependent variable, right? What it is, how it's measured, right? So attendance in meditation classes has been defined as, and it could be, the number of sessions in the 12-week course attended, right? Or it could be like our retirement community, where it's just the number of sessions overall, right? So it's hoped that they'll attend class weekly, just ongoing, right? So different definitions of how it's interpreted, what attendance is, our dependent variable. Then, second, we want to say what's the significance of it, what outcomes are related to meditation class attendance. Here's where we say that attending class has been linked to several positive outcomes, such as quality of life. So what we're saying here is it's important, right? It really impacts the life of a person to attend meditation classes, and that's why we want them to attend. It's an important link. So then we might discuss the factors that are linked to attending, right? So one of the most consistent predictors, say, is availability of the class in the community and things like that. But don't discuss the independent variable yet, right? That's for part 3. But do include the covariate variables. So we discuss what's associated with attendance, right? Such as age, we have our citations, doctors prescribing classes, we have our citations. But it's important, if you mention something that impacts class attendance to actually have it included in the quantitative study. Because if you say it's important and then it's not in the actual analysis, that begs the question, why isn't it in the actual analysis? So you might have another section, or even in the discussion section, it might mention, other factors that were not mentioned that impact class attendance, that were not measured in this study are so-and-so, and that might account for some of the findings. Right, so second, we're discussing the independent variable. Again, what it is, how it's measured. Right, so if it's class instructor preference, if that's what we call, what we found, we say how has that been measured, right? Then we discuss how traits, class instructor preferences, have influenced attendance, right? And many times, in a situation like this, you might imagine there's not a whole lot of literature, right? But there's there's studies that relate on a quasi level, right? That suggest these relationships, although it might not be exactly what we're looking at. And that's the thing to include if you don't have a lot of definitive literature. Right? And then, of course, if we have multiple independent variables like we do, we just repeat this process with a second independent variable. Now, third, here's where we link up, right? So we're linking our dependent variable and our independent variable, right? So first, we're stating the need for our study. So the deficiencies in the literature. Research has not been conducted that relates instructor preferences to the rate of class attendance. So that's compelling. Right? So we're saying, if this hasn't been done, we made the argument that it needs to be done, and then we say we're going to do it. Right? So it's engaging. Right? So however, right, and this is where we have our suggestion, evidence suggests rates of attendance at meditation classes influenced by instructor traits. So here too, you could also put that literature that suggests the relationship. So we're saying that the study hasn't been done, but we say that there are data that suggest this, therefore a definitive study should be done, which is what we're doing. Okay, then the final paragraph. And the final paragraph should only be, 4 or 5 sentences, like a normal paragraph is, but it should have all this information, right? So we want to state the independent-dependent variable relationship, right? The current study is going to examine if instructor preference has a significant relationship with meditation class attendance. We mentioned the covariates that impact the dependent variable that will also be included, right? Also include several covariates shown to influence class attendance. And then wrap it up with a statement of significance again, right? So this analysis is the first study of how instructor preference impacts attendance. Right? Oh, and then, because it's a mixed method study, we also have to consider, right? Do we have a qualitative hypothesis, separate from a quantitative? So do we have a separate qualitative, a separate quantitative hypothesis addressing separate data? Right? Or, in our case, do we have a mixed methods research question and a hypothesis where all the data, the quantitative and qualitative, are going to go toward answering those research questions and testing those hypotheses? Now the methods. You may ask, what do the methods include? And as it says here, they include a lot, right? So we've discussed a lot of this separately in the past sessions, quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. So we don't have to go into it too in depth, right? We discussed recruitment of study participants, well, not so much informed consent and IRB, data collection, right, describing the sample. What we will focus on, because it's key to data analysis, are the measurement instruments, right, and the data analysis plan. And of course, we already mentioned our mixed method research design. So the measurement instruments, right? Point. To understand the statistical analysis, you have to understand how each variable is measured, right? That often includes, the values given to each category, like how, remember the doctor prescribed 1, 2, and 3, right? And we left out the reference group. You have to know which number that was. Okay. So the measurement instruments, if we have a continuous quantitative scale, which is often the hardest to summarize, it should mention all these things. Now, all the scales and all the measurements should have, a description, references, reliability, and validity if used in past research. We should have the number of items on the scale. Like for our class enjoyment, it was only one item, right? Do you enjoy class? But it could have been 10 items, each tapping that construct. Do you look forward to class? Do you stay late? Do you come early? All those sort of things. But it was just one item, so that's an important distinction. How each item was scored, right? So ours, do you enjoy class on a scale of 1 to 5? So a mean score of 4 reflects a lot of people enjoy class. But if it was a scale of 1 to 10 and there was a mean score of 4, that's suggesting not a lot of people enjoy class. So we have to know that range. Right? The methods to compute the scale, for example, if we had 10 items, do we add them together and divide by the number of items? Right? So that would give us a range of 1 to 5 if the scale was 1 to 5, or do we just add them up? Right? So then if we added them up, just if they were 1 to 5 and we added 10 up, it would have a range up to 50. So we have to know that. How do we compute that scale? Right? And then specify the range of scores, as we said. So 1 to 5, to 10 to 50. Right? What does a higher score indicate? Right? So if we have class enjoyment, is the highest score the highest level of class enjoyment or the lowest? And then again, the psychometrics. So if we have multiple items, right, on that Likert scale of 1 to 5, in order to have good internal consistency, right, the reliability, we have to do the Cronbach's alpha for internal consistency. So if there are any applicable psychometrics like that, we need to include it, and that's all for one scale. So class enjoyment, as we said, is a single item measured on a Likert type scale of 1 to 5, where higher scores equal greater enjoyment. So you can see there's many things, but you can encapsulate them pretty well just in one sentence. Right? So like we said, if we had a multiple item scale, we'd have to do the internal consistency check and make sure the Cronbach's alpha was over 0.70 per se. So that's the most commonly examined, psychometric property for scales. So if you only see one, that's usually the one you see. So it's good to keep it in mind. So then we list how each factor is measured. Right? So in our manuscript, we list how each factor is measured. Age, right? So we say respondents reported their age in years. Doctor prescription. The residents reported if the doctor recommended, did not recommend, right? If he said prescribed, yes, prescribed, no, right? So they're reporting that to us. So we're saying who the informant is. Then barriers to class. So we specify that we content coded the qualitative data, right, regarding barriers, and that created our variable barriers to class. Then class assignment, right? So that's measured using administrative data, right? Recall? So that it told us which class the residents are referred to, the morning or evening. And then the class instructor preference, that's actually the administrative data, right? Saying, who led the class, Miss Albright or Miss Gettenline, right? So it's actually just the class instructor, but we're labeling it as preference because based on the qualitative data, most most of the 77%, most of the residents preferred Miss Albright. So conceptually, that's what we're calling it. And then finally, we have our qualitative measurement instruments. Right? So what did we use in the qualitative survey? So the interviewer, right, asked the resident, please tell me things that might encourage you to attend class. And the second question, qualitatively, we asked, the administration was considering moving all classes to the evening. Would that help encourage you to attend meditation class? So there we go.